All right, you can see I got rows and rows of trees behind me here. We did a massive tree planting here about a week ago. We planted 6,000 trees on the farm. So today I wanted to just talk about kind of the strategy behind that tree planting. There's definitely some screening considerations. There were some deer bedding considerations. But yeah, it felt good to get those trees all in. So stick with me and I'll show you what we were up to that day. All right, so here's the first spot. I'm gonna show off about 2 acres. These were no-till beans last year. This year they're gonna be trees. So they were no-tilled beans. The ground was prepped and ready. The grasses were killed. We always want to get those grasses killed when we're doing tree plantings because they suck moisture from those trees, create a lot of competition. But they're dead, and this ground was perfect for planting. You can see here the trees went in very, very well with that planter. I love using a tree planter because you can get a lot of trees planted quickly. And another benefit of it is it's got a deep wheel on it that cuts into the soil. So you get a nice deep root when you plant with a tree planter. It actually kind of pulls that root down as you're planting because you have the big disc that cuts open the soil, and then there's like a big spade that splits it open. You stick your tree in, and then the wheels on the back just push that tree, or push that soil back together, and you get these nicely planted trees. And I don't mind rows one bit. I know some guys dislike planting trees in rows, but I don't see an issue with it. I don't see that it causes social stress, or I don't remember even what the argument is against planting trees in rows. I'm perfectly okay with putting trees in rows, but that planter did a great job. Another reason it was really nice planting into this bean stubble is the ground was relatively flat and even. When you're planting with a planter, if you have a lot of gopher mounds, kind of throws that wheel off in the back, and you'll have spots where the trees don't get planted that deep. But when you have nice flat ground like this, the trees are going to go in just super easy when you're utilizing a tree planter. I mean, in the ground, we had so much moisture before this. Now we've had probably 2 inches of rain at least since we planted the trees. So, I mean, those trees were going in like a hot knife through butter. I mean, it was awesome. Perfect conditions for tree planting. All right, so here's the strategy with this area. So like I said, this was 2 acres of food before. But the problem with this 2 acres is it really didn't do anything for us. It actually kind of worked against us, because our goal with this big ridge up here is to get the movement going that way. And we got food stacked all the way along the top part of this ridge. Well, we put this into food because it was a spot the farmer wasn't going to farm, because it's kind of, I mean, you can see it's a hillside. It wasn't great soil. And we decided, you know what, this is a good spot just to stick some extra food. Well, when we have food down here, what happens? The deer split their movement. Some of them drop down, some of them go up. And this is really stacking in to be great bedding right here on this edge. So if we can get this grown up in spruce, what'll happen is it's going to screen off this bedding up here, and it's going to make this edge that much stronger for holding deer. So here's this edge that the entire thing has been edge feathered. It's a nice, beautiful, soft edge. If I was really thinking at the time I did this edge feathering, I would have waited 2 years and done switchgrass right here, which I still can because we left a little bit of a gap between the planted trees. Pretty decent gap right here, because I'm wanting that woody regen to kind of creep out. So what I may do eventually is put some switchgrass down right here. But right now, my goal initially with this edge feathering was to get the woods to start to creep out, which it slowly but surely is. You can see the regen we got coming. See all these young trees right here. And we got tons, I mean, you got acorns on the ground yet, but lots of young trees popping. So the regen is starting to leach out because I wanted a nice soft wedge soft edge here. I wanted to extend this woodlot a little bit, but I may add just a little bit of switchgrass here on this part right here, just to kind of double down on the screening for this woodlot up here. The types of trees that we planted were white spruce and white pine. I kept the white pine away from areas that are high in deer activity on our property. This spot near the swamp is a very high deer activity area, so this was all white spruce right here, because if it was white pine, the deer would probably kill the majority of them. And I'd have to make sure that I bud capped them all to even give them a chance, or if I caged them, obviously they'd all make it then. But we did all white spruce down here because the primary goal was to do the screening right here. So you can see this field right here as it slopes down to the neighbors. Eventually this will all be screening. It's going to take 10 years, 15 years. But once it is screening, it's really going to build up this woodlot right here and create a much stronger edge for bedding. As I'm walking through this edge, I'm actually starting to see quite a bit of woody regen that's popping all the way out to where we planted these trees. So I take that part back about planting switchgrass here. I'll probably just, I love using what the seed bed has for me, and I want more woods right here, so I'll probably give this more time and just see what nature can do for me here. I mean, I love the idea of that soft edge too, because the woody regen is going to be taller initially, closer to the woods, because I'm sure that's where it's popping first. You get that transition of the woody regen where it gets shorter as it gets closer to these trees, and eventually in these trees we'll start to get some woody species popping, which will be great. I do want to note, sometimes food is not always the answer. Yes, every property, there isn't a property I'm going to go to where we're not going to have food plots, but in some circumstances the food really can work against you. Like this was a spot I've known for years we needed to ditch the food, and we finally did it this year, which is good. But more food isn't always better. We don't need these 2 acres. We're doing so much work in the timber to build up the woody resources and woody regeneration, the woody food, woody browse that the deer need, that we can sacrifice a couple acres back here and turn it into trees, because it really did hurt us from a hunting perspective. So more food isn't always a good thing. All right, here's another spot that we planted white spruce only, because we are right by the swamp. I'm not putting pine down here because the deer yard up in that swamp. So this is the first place they hit when they're coming out of the woods to head up into the woody browse and all the food plots and things like that in the winter. So if I put white pine down here, they will get smoked. So this is all white spruce, and the big strategy with this was screening. So right here I'm walking down the property line, so this is screening for the property line. Just trying to, when you're setting up your property, you want to try keep the deer feeling as secure as possible on your own chunk of land. So I'm always screening off property lines. We get along really good with this neighbor, and he actually asked me you know, about kind of a tree planting strategy, and I said I'd screen off your property lines, and I even said I'd screen off our property line so his deer can feel, well, I shouldn't say his deer, they're all everybody's deer, right? But the deer on his property can feel safe. So I'm sure that he'll double down on the screening that I'm doing out here by planting trees most likely along these lines at some point. But the ultimate goal is we just want the deer to feel as secure as possible. So I had tried doing a tree planting up here years ago, but we had a drought, so there's a few scattered trees that are still standing out here, but for the most part they died. So here's a spot I haven't done the prep yet to kill the cool season grass, so that is definitely on the agenda very, very soon. I'll be getting out here with clethodim in the next few weeks, and I'm going to be smoking all this grass because, again, the grass acts like a sponge, and if I want these trees to make it, I need to kill the cool season grass. So anyway, screening for the property line right here. All right, here's another spot, primarily for screening. There's the big swamp edge. Again, just white spruce, but it's dry right on the edge of all this, and you can see we got aspen. So my goal is to get this swamp screened off so I can actually build up bedding right on this edge, because I got about 15-20 yards of edge here that is dry that I could definitely build up as deer bedding if it was secure. So I need it to be secure. That's where the spruce come in. We loaded this entire edge up in spruce just to screen that off. And if we can get deer, even if it's wet, it's deep enough in spots where the deer might bed on the back edge of that spruce. What that's going to do is pull the deer closer to the edge in daylight and get them more daylight active on the food sources. So the screening will hopefully pull them out so they start bedding up on this edge instead of bedding way in the back, because it is super wet right behind this edge. So what ends up happening is they bed probably 200-300 yards back in spots where they can find these little dry rises in the swamp. But I want them bedding closer to the edge, because if I can pull the does and fawns closer to the edge, hopefully that means I can pull the bucks in closer behind them and get more daylight buck activity. But that's what we did here. Just a massive screen for this big old swamp that goes for miles. That's right behind our farm here. All right, so here's the last spot I'm going to talk about as far as our tree planting went. So you can see it's that spot on our farm. We got a lot of switchgrass planted. Then we have a lot of these open pockets. Well, we filled in several of these open pockets with these conifers. Now you can see on the edge here, I got some spruce. The goal with this big open space in the middle was to do spruce running on the outside, and then I got white pine going right through the gut. Because when we do spruce on the outside, that's that external screening that's needed to protect from the wind that's going to whip through here. But when I have white pine in the middle, eventually those branches will kind of self-prune, and you'll have space underneath those white pine for the deer to bed. They'll have a nice bedroom where they got protection from over above, and they got protection from the side. So the goal is to create a little bedroom right in the middle of this switchgrass. You can see we got beautiful trees this year. Nice, healthy trees. Straight from the Minnesota DNR. Here's my middle space where I got the white pine going. Now, white pine are highly susceptible to deer browse, and deer like to rub on them too. We planted a couple thousand. I don't necessarily want all these white pines to take. I planted them fairly thick. I'm assuming the deer will kill a good handful of them. I just need some of them to make it past the deer browse line, and I will, if I have time, I will do some bud capping and do my best to protect these white pine. But I just absolutely love white pine as a deer species. So I'm gonna try some right in here. I'm confident I'll get a handful or a good amount to make it. The reason I planted white pine here was because when deer are browsing white pine, they generally are not in this area, because when they're browsing white pine is when they tend to be in their deer yarding area, which is quite a ways that way. They don't make it this far, because in the winter what happens is the switchgrass lodges once we get the heavy snow. So they kind of leave this space alone, because there's not a real reason for them to be here until probably mid-spring. They start to filter back in here when they're preparing for fawning. So this is a spot that just doesn't have a whole lot of deer activity. So I'm going to see if I can get away with the white pine planting here. We'll see what happens. But again, like I said, I just want, if I can get half of them to go, that would be about perfect, because I did plant them pretty thick. This is one thing I intentionally did. I got a couple of these runs set up kind of between the switchgrass. I wanted to get some conifers planted in these runs. So there's a spot. Here's another spot right here. Deer love bedding up next to these isolated conifers. So if I can get strips of these established in between the switchgrass, I know those are going to end up being bedding locations. And this is already where the deer are bedding, in the switchgrass. But all this is going to do is enhance it even more. Now here's a space that we did not plant trees, but you can see, go a little bit further, we did plant some right there. So these open pockets I had in the switchgrass, we threw a handful of these conifers in, and it should make for excellent bedding structure in the future. It'll be a ways down the road, but eventually this is going to be that extra structure in the switchgrass that the deer will really hone in on. Another reason I love these white pines is they grow fast. If I can get these to even the 5-year mark, you know, with some decent moisture years, these white pines will have outgrown the deer's reach by then. So hopefully a handful get through here. We'll see what happens. So one other thought on white pines. Before you plant them, talk to your area DNR forester. They will know if they're going to stand a chance or not in your area if you've never planted them before. And if they say the majority are going to get killed by the deer, just trade them out for red pines. Red pines are a great tree too. I've planted several on our farm, and they'll serve the same purpose as the white pines. So if you need to pivot because you want to plant pines but the deer are going to kill them, go with some red pines. Now other species I plan to plant in this area to add some diversity. Eventually we'll get some American plum, gray dogwood, probably some nannyberry going in this area. Got a long list of projects on the farm, so a lot of this stuff I've been wanting to do for 5 to 10 years. There's a lot to do. So I don't get it all done every spring, but 6,000 trees in this spring was a major win for us. And with all this rain we've got and all the rain forecasted over the next few weeks, we might finally have a good tree growing year. So I think hopefully I picked the right year to plant trees. Now I'll say that and we'll have like a major drought again this summer, but here's hoping we don't. So anyway, that was the project last week, and as always I'll be sure to provide updates over the year to show how it's doing. All right, y'all take care. God bless.